thing I don't know about you.
We'll call the meeting of the Design Adjustment Committee to order. Before we get started, I have to read an introduction. The Design Adjustment Committee's purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's technical standards and specifications manual. The Design Adjustment Committee does not consider housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means it's like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based on the facts presented. All variance requests require a 4/5 vote of the committee to grant the variance. Appeals of the Design Adjustment Committee are to the Board of Adjustment. A written notice must be filed with the city clerk within 30 days of the committee's decision. Appeals are set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment within 30 days or as soon thereafter as practicable. The parties of these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion about the matter or financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with the affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and the committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and the members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in at the clipboard in the back of the room and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer the oath for any individuals who intend to provide testimony.
If I could have staff, applicants, and members of the public who wish to speak today to please stand, raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Anybody have any comments? Anybody have any corrections? If not, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I think we have two, the September 21st and the last meeting, October 19th.
You want to do them both together?
I think we can.
Okay, motion to approve both meeting minutes from the prior two meetings.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to our first item, which is a continued item from our last meeting, proximity at Watermark. Brian?
Good afternoon. This request was continued from your October 19th meeting to allow time for the applicant to adjust their plans based on the feedback they've received in the committee at that time. Again, this project includes approximately 40.45 acres. It's currently zoned MD17 CD high-density multi-dwelling residential and was recently approved for a 248-unit apartment development through rezoning. The project includes two access points, one on River Road, one at the intersection of Independence, and one to the north near Coleman Drive. There's the requested adjustments have been modified since the last meeting, since the applicant has now introduced a new public street. So the requested adjustments for you today are relief from the standard cross-section for a residential collector street, relief from the minimum horizontal centerline curve radii on a residential collector street, relief from the maximum length of a cul-de-sac, the maximum length of a private drive, and then relief from the minimum property line offset for a driveway along a major thoroughfare. That's all that staff has at this time. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
Any questions for Brian? Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the applicant have a presentation?
We do. Brian Eckel, Cape Fear Development Partners, 102 Autumn Hall Drive, Wilmington, North Carolina. My comments are going to be very brief. I'm going to let the professional come up and speak to you. I just wanted to thank y'all for giving us that continuance. We heard you loud and clear. We realized we had a lot of work to do, and we took the time to meet with planning and fire department and have made some meaningful changes. So I'm going to turn it over to our design consultant, Cindy Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Cindy Wolf, and as Brian said, I've been working with them the past couple weeks to just sort of sort out the justification and a little bit more detailed exhibits to show what we're talking about. First and foremost, I know you all have seen the property before, but I think it's important just to reiterate for the record that two of the specific design standard or reasons why the design standards can be waived or altered have to do with topographic constraints and the presence of existing buildings, streams, or other natural features. And this is absolutely the basis for most of the waivers we're asking for. Although it's a large piece of property, the actual developable area is constrained not only by the river, but by the necessity to intersect at River Road across from Independence, the marsh, the wetlands that go up into the frontage area, and then just what we have as an alternative access point to River Road, which is a private access easement. The entrance in, the entrance in was originally a road for the marina storage facility, looks just fine, but as you go back, it was constrained by a one-way bridge that is not of a level that would satisfy service vehicles and large trucks. Go ahead. So our waivers number 1 and 2 all have to do with the new road that we're proposing. Rather than just a driveway from River Road, we're proposing to dedicate a street. Whether it becomes a public street or a private street depends on further, work out with the TRC and the departments in the city, just based upon the fact that there will be a bridge on there. But the road itself, because this project is over 50 units, it would be considered generally a collector, a residential collector, which has a right-of-way of 60 feet. In a situation like this, where we're trying to stay as far away as possible from the conservation resources of the wetlands, we're proposing that this is a 50-foot right-of-way. We've talked with some members of the TRC about the asphalt pavement being 23 feet with vertical curb and gutter. We would propose that sidewalk and the non-municipal utility easement only be on the north. And again, this is just to keep development as far away as possible from the resources. And then that the center line radiuses on the curve. We have our 100-foot tangents, but again, this is not really a collector road. It will never be extended based upon the constraints of the river and everything else. So we've taken it in there to the point where it'll intersect another point of access. That'll come a little bit later. And just the radii on a regular local would just be 100 feet. We're proposing 150 feet. And that's just for a little bit more interest in the road in the way we are proposing it. Go ahead. The third and fourth waivers have to do with the length of that cul-de-sac. Generally, the technical and subdivision regulations limit the length of a dead-end road to 500 feet, but it makes the most sense to bring this cul-de-sac all the way into where it would access, or where it would intersect the southbound access easement that comes from north, and you can see that at the top in green. And it will never be extended. So again, the length of the street is all that we have the ability to get into there. Then the fourth is the length of a private drive off of a public street, and the combination of the two takes us to the end of that last parking space. But you can see that there are dual access points all the way around each of the buildings. So circulation of any type of vehicles or any type of, if there was a blockage of one way, there is always another way up to every point on this project. And this is a little hard to see, but just so as a preliminary, the engineer went through the auto-turn simulation with a vehicle as a 48-foot ladder truck, which I think is larger than anything we have at the city, but we have no problem getting around all of that circulation onto all points of the buildings. The buildings, of course, will be sprinklered, but regardless, there are access to all points of the parking of the buildings through this plan. Then the final waiver has to do with driveways along a major thoroughfare, which River Road is. Of course, River Road is maintained and by NCDOT. It's a state road. Our impediment there, obviously, is we only have 83 foot of frontage, so it'd be virtually impossible to have 75 foot of offset from either property line. However, the point here is that it's existing. It is an existing road that was given a permit from DOT originally. It is at least 20 foot of pavement down to the last current use, and part of our proposal is to then extend that 20-foot pavement to the north end of the project so that there is secured travel way and wide enough all the way to the project as an accessory or a secondary access in addition to the new street. With that, we feel like we do meet those, the reasons why waivers can be issued, specifically that we do continue to meet the intent of the code, which is to ensure the protection and safety of life and property in our community. Certainly conformance with comprehensive land use plans, promote underutilized land where urban services are available. Multifamily residential projects can accommodate that growth, and in this particular case, if we were limited by some of these technical standards, we couldn't take full advantage of the property itself. We're not increasing congestion or compromising safety, since it will be a dead-end cul-de-sac, and traffic to it will be limited to the ingress-egress of residents and the guests of the apartment complex. We haven't created any lots without direct frontage, so we believe that these waivers are reasonable. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Cindy. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Any discussion about these items before we open the public hearing? Okay. I don't know if there's anybody here who wishes to speak, but I will open the public hearing on this item. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Okay, so we have, Brian, I asked this, I seem every meeting, I think. We have to take action on the 5 waivers requested. How about the overall plan?
Since they are now dedicating a street, it would be considered a subdivision. You'll have to act on the preliminary plan, including the conditions included in the staff report.
Thank you. Well, I know personally I like this a lot more. I appreciate the changes that were made. I think the site circulates pretty well. This, to me, is a lot more palatable for approval, even though there's, I guess, technically more waivers, but I think that they're more palatable. Any discussion?
Yes. So from the cul-de-sac, if the access going to the north up to River Road, it seems to me if that were also a street, at least that would start to get us to less variances needed, at least for the length of the private drive, or the site potentially. Here's where I'm at with it. The buildable area of it, they've got the wetlands to the south. They are limited by that. The spot where they are building, though, it seems like the standards can be met. They're just not being met, right? Like,
Yeah,
is it possible to put a road in there that mitigates these variances, or at least a couple of them. The length of the driveway is really the one where I'm at.
The maximum, number 4, the maximum length of a private drive, is that? the
Yeah,
one you're-
I mean, you know, if that connection up to River Road was a public street, it looks like it probably would be around 600 feet or so. I don't know if we could get a measurement on that. So they still might need a variance. It would be less, and then, so it makes me wonder the question, well, why isn't there just another road in there for access? The reason that these standards were put in with the dimensions that they were made is to try to undo the suburban-style developments that we find where parking is the most important factor. Those dimensions were put in to try to replicate to the best of you can on a site a accessibility that is provided by the grid, right? And I understand we're not going to get a perfect grid in this site. I understand that completely. This is a tough site to work with. But I do think there is availability and there's room for more access in a way that they can do it that doesn't require a variance. I don't see anything that's prohibiting that from happening here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see, you know, if going through the variances, there are 5 of them, you know, the reduction from the 60-foot to the 50-foot, being adjacent to the wetland areas right there, you know, I can definitely see the need or the constraint of that. I think that you know, on a road like this, the center line radiuses, obviously that would be a lot more important on a higher volume street. So I feel like 1 and 2, I'm fine with. I think maybe we may differ a little bit on the 3 and the 4, because I feel like, you know, the area to the north, that kind of what I'll call the flagpole portion of the lot, you know, it extends through an industrial area. It's got complicating factors with driveway access. It's all kind of just one big driveway, so it would be hard to make it meet standards from at least what I could tell in looking at it, because you have everybody who just kind of pulls off, and you know, and also I think, I don't know, I mean, I kind of think that if you were to extend another road to the north, we'd have issues with the adjacent parking, the perpendicular parking, which would limit the number of parking spaces that they could use. So you kind of feel like you're kind of entering the site, but you have that connectivity, so the cars can go either way. But you kind of feel like you're entering the site. I don't know. Personally, I don't have a problem with it, but I get your point.
I mean, I'm speaking literally from the variance perspective. If that were to happen, right, or if public streets were introduced in a way that would mitigate those distance, it can be done, I guess, is my only point. It's just not being done, right?
I agree with that.
So that I think is the issue for me. I don't know that we have the ability to say that if it can be done, don't do it. In my mind, that's not the variance process, but we can disagree on that. So.
Any other thoughts from the committee?
My only thought on number 3, Rob, was there appears to be a lot of wetlands on the front end of the parcel. So, you know, to get to, you know, if you combine that with trying to meet the north entrance at the cul-de-sac, and you're limited with the wetlands up front, you have to extend that road a certain distance in order to have that cul-de-sac match up with the north entrance. So, yeah, it's more than the 500 feet, but it doesn't seem to be that big of a stretch, particularly since there's no additional traffic coming in the future. The road is not going to be extended. You got to get past that bridge and all the wetlands up front. You know, that's a given.
Okay.
So that's why I don't have too much of a problem with number 3. And I agree with you on number 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think another point of clarification, I don't know if the applicant can speak to this yet. I'm not sure it's even relevant. I noticed that there was a bridge proposed. I don't know that we care whether or not that's a culvert, a bridge, a bottomless culvert, whatever y'all can work out with the Corps of Engineers, whatever they end up requiring. I think from a city standards perspective, it doesn't have to be a bridge. It can be a culvert. I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of water, but there is kind of like a wetland finger that projects to the north there. And so I just wanted to make that point of clarification. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bridge to meet standards. It can be culvert, bottomless culvert. We certainly want to be able to maintain the environmental conditions from, through the whatever is proposed, but I just wanted to make that point.
And maybe as a follow-up on that, again, since it's my understanding that there's not a city standard specifically for the rating of the bridge, and on the preliminary plans here, it's listed as a minimum 25 ton, and just as a note for the design team that CFPUA's largest Vector trucks would probably push that 25 ton.
Okay. My wording had to do with it was an area being bridged. So we had talked a little about that in the last couple days. A bridge, a culvert, whatever they work out, and certainly they would have to clear it with both the CFPUA and the fire department as far as the weight ability of that crossing. But yes, that was my mistake in calling it a bridge, and it is a crossing. We'll create that crossing however is necessary to meet everyone's requirements.
Has this been through the TRC yet?
It has on the preliminary TRC, that's how they got
The
here.
pre-TRC, but it hasn't been to formal yet?
That's
Is that correct? Okay,
Yes. So yeah, the details haven't been worked out
understood.
with that crossing.
Thank you.
If I might, just keep in mind that access that goes to the north, there are several other properties that have that rights to that. And so that's part of the issue, is we don't really have an ability to dedicate that as right-of-way. And that's why we're proposing it as a very much improved, so that it can meet all of the criteria of access, but as a secondary access, and also because it does go through that industrial area.
It's not going to be gated or anything.
It's roughly 1,200 feet.
There's not going to be any gates or anything like that
No.
to limit access to the north?
That's not their intention, not into the site whatsoever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess in my mind, if we're, and I'm with, I think, the group here on, 3 or 4 of them, I think, are totally acceptable, especially like the standard cross-section. I think putting it on the north side to disturb as little as possible the wetlands to the south is a good idea. Curve radii, I'm with you. It's the private drive in the cul-de-sac that has got me, because if I say, tell me which standard of approval is prohibiting this from being met, I guess that's where I'm at. Like, there's no topographic constraints keeping them from either running the road all the way through the site and connecting it back, in which case you wouldn't even need a cul-de-sac or a roundabout. But there's a way to accomplish this that doesn't need a variance. And I am not seeing which one of these standards for approval that those 2 variances align with. I'm not seeing it. But if y'all are, please let me know. But I'm not seeing how we get there with it.
If I might,
Yep.
I think we hang our hat on the site layout of adjacent adjoining properties and adjoining uses or their vehicles that are incompatible. I think that's a big part of it.
Cindy, I know there's, excuse my ignorance on parking, but are there parking requirements for a project like this? Number of spaces and so forth?
Yes, there are.
And where do you guys stand with parking counts and so forth?
I'm sorry. They are right in line with what is permitted
Minimum or maximum?
to the maximum, which we're finding, of course, isn't always all that's necessary, but that's neither here nor there. It would be the maximum.
Okay.
So even without the connection to the north up to River Road being a public street, even if, let's just say, because we just heard that there's multiple owners, let's just say that was cut off, right? It's not a public access that can be relied upon for, you know, safety and access from those ends. I don't see anything that's prohibiting the road that's coming in across from Independence to come in, and instead of being a roundabout or a cul-de-sac at the end, that actually goes through the site and reconnects back. There's nothing prohibiting that from happening. It's just the design that's doing it, right? And that's not something I don't feel that we can approve.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to maybe pluck the low-hanging fruit off here because we have to take some action on this. Let's start with the numbers 1 and 2. I guess we'll start with number 1. The 60 to a 50-foot right-of-way, that would also include the reduction of non-municipal easement on one side, the elimination of sidewalk on the south side, or maybe it's not, yeah, south side. Any objections to the section that they're proposing? Any concerns? I feel like the environmental, you know, constraints on the south side with the wetlands sort of justify that. Plus, there's not going to be development there for anybody to use a second sidewalk. I mean, they're making the pedestrian connectivity, which is, I thought, something that at least was an issue at the last meeting. Thoughts on that? Agreed?
I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and make that motion that we approve variance number 1 due to the environmental constraints of the wetlands on the south side of the road.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Similarly, I feel like the reduction in the horizontal centerline curve radius, I think those standards are more appropriate for a larger volume road, plus they're trying to kind of bring it in along the edge of the wetland areas. So I really don't see a problem with granting that variance for the same reasons due to the environmental constraints. So that would be my motion to approve the variance number 2 from the 200 to the 150 foot centerline radius due to environmental constraints.
Second?
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's number 2 carries. Since it seems like 3 and 4 may be the questionable ones, I'm going to jump to 5. The minimum property line offset for a driveway along a major thoroughfare. If that's not a street and they don't have the ability to extend a street, it is considered a driveway, and they certainly have, in my opinion, a site constraint with limited frontage. I don't know that they could meet the 75-foot property line offset, so I would make a motion to approve waiver number 5 on the grounds of site constraints.
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So that brings us to 3 and 4, which directly deal with the length of the cul-de-sac and the maximum length of a private drive. So, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is maybe a question for Brian, I'm not sure. The maximum length of a private drive is listed at 1,614, and it includes the cumulative length of the proposed cul-de-sac, and then I guess the drive aisle width all the way to that back corner. If the road was somehow looped, would that standard change?
No.
So in other words, let's say that just hypothetically they turned the road and made the flagpole portion of the lot a street. I guess where I'm going with that is like I'm fine with the internal circulation, the way that they have the multiple access points on both, for both buildings. I feel like the fact that the road can't be extended and they have the Cape Fear River there, I don't know that they're gonna improve upon that particular standard. Am I missing something on that one?
If they put a road through, they'd still have the length of a private drive from a through street, so there'd still be a variance that would need to be granted. It wouldn't cure that variance.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, so if there was a looping road from Independence Boulevard, if the road was L-shaped and it connected to River Road at the top and it looped down and connected to River Road again, would that be considered a through street at that point?
It would.
Okay.
So then you would measure from that through street, which would still require a variance.
Okay.
I'm uncertain where would it be the
It would be greater than 500 feet. The private drive off of that street would be greater than 500 feet.
Oh, so this is the 5.8. That's what this is, this particular waiver. I don't know why I didn't recognize it that. Is that?
There would no longer be a cul-de-sac, so that would go away, yes.
Okay.
But if you put in a street that connected up to River Road and then back down to Independence of River Road, the length of the private driveway off of that street would still exceed 500 feet.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I feel like the shape of the lot would necessitate some form of variance here. You know, whether it's if they looped the road and they were at 500, or whether they didn't loop the road and they were at 800, the connectivity and the circulation is the same either way. So I feel like they do have a site constraint. I'm gonna go ahead and make that motion for number 4. This is variance number 4, maximum length of a private drive. They have 800 feet. I'm going to make the motion that we approve that on the grounds of site constraint. I don't really know how else to describe it. And the lack of the ability to extend that road. That's my motion.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of approval of variance number 4, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
4 out of 5. So that motion carries. Okay, so that brings us to the maximum length of a cul-de-sac street. Any other discussion or thoughts on that one?
We
Dennis, you have any?
generally discourage cul-de-sacs. I mean, even from a comprehensive plan level, trying to minimize those. What cul-de-sac streets end up becoming are private driveways that are publicly paid for, right? So if it's not part of an accessibility function or a connectivity function for an overall street network, the taxpayers will now be on the dime for repairing that street that is specifically serving this one development. And that goes for if it's in a neighborhood as well. If it's a public street with a cul-de-sac or a roundabout, it just ends up being 4 people that use a publicly owned street. In this case, it's 250 or whatever it is. The cul-de-sac street is not a good, I think, solution.
Yeah, but I guess by that same theory, if you extended the road to the north, it would still serve the same function. It would still serve only this neighborhood, and the taxpayers would be paying for more.
You're looking at it based on current uses of the surrounding areas, which is not, I think, in our purview to look at, right? Like,
You're talking about the areas to the north.
yeah, in my mind, the tech standards are set up, right, for long-term city building, access, accessibility, utilities. I mean, all of this. There's a reason why we land on these dimensions. Even beyond that, there's just a placemaking rationale for it. I mean, I think we've talked about this at the last one. The reason these numbers were come up with were not pulled out of a hat, right? They come from tried and true city building methodologies and dimensions. That's what these seek to recreate. It's not simply just to try to build us an onerous street that's going to be really expensive for the hell of it. That's not what we're trying to do here. It's about placemaking and about city building, right? And I think we mentioned this before. If they continued that street through here, redesigned the building, realigned it, leave it up to them to try to figure out how to comply with this. That's their role here. That's the designer's role here, not ours. What I'm saying is they can comply with it. They are not. I think it's that simple for me, right? And beyond that, and our city attorneys can tell me if I'm wrong, do we have any purview beyond these 5 standards for approval? Because I don't think so, and it would be hard for me to say, hey, it was possible for them to do this. We just said it was fine, and so we didn't do it. It's fine isn't one of these standards for approval.
Can I get is there some discussion about whether or not that easement that extends to the north, can that be dedicated as right-of-way? Is there anyone here who can answer that question? Yes, please, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Sam Frank. I'm a representative of the applicant. I work with the law firm of Ward & Smith. The flag section of the lot, as you described it, is subject to easement rights of several other parties to utilize that property for access. If we were to offer it for public dedication, those folks would have a reasonable argument that we were overburdening their easement, which is currently used both for our private access and for theirs. And for that reason, we don't consider that a viable alternative.
How would providing a road overburden their easement?
Because it's currently used by a limited number of people for private access. And if we were to establish a public easement over it, it would be available to the public for access.
But as you designed it, it's available to the public for access, is that correct?
I'm not sure which road are we talking about?
As designed, the connection that goes to the north is currently accessible to the public, correct?
No, it's private land, subject to private easements. It's not a publicly dedicated right-of-way.
So it's just for the people in this community or those other industries.
Okay.
Now, it's not gated,
I see
but-
what you're saying. Can the 250 people that live in there take that road?
They could.
Okay, so that's the point.
I'm doubting that they would. but-
How is that less of a burden? If the situations are, like the amount of volume is the same, I'm not seeing this being the issue.
From a legal standpoint, it's the difference between 248 homeowners versus 250,000 people who live in New Hanover County. You're talking about the difference between a private road and a public one, which is open to anybody from the public. You don't even have to live in the county to access a public road.
If someone driving down River Road, is there a sign that says private road or anything like this that would keep people from moving? I mean, I think it's a little bit much to say that the hundreds of thousands of people are going to start driving through this thing or any public street.
This isn't an argument that comes out of nowhere. When we went through the zoning process, the only people who spoke in any substantive way against the zoning were the owners of that property who hold access easements over that road, who expressed their concerns that it would be utilized by people that didn't have a right to do so. And so it is a very real concern for the property owners in this section of town that flag on this lot would be utilized for access by more than the owner of this lot and the people who utilize it for their access pursuant to an easement.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I mean, in my mind, that if with all that said, it sounds like they would prefer to discourage people from going that route, in my mind, which lends a little bit more leverage to making the internal circulation comply with our text standards.
Yeah, I mean,
These aren't like optional standards that like because we didn't want to or because some other thing happened. That's not what we're here in my mind to do. It is possible to meet this standard. Please meet it. I think it's that simple. None of these standards for approval apply in my mind, both of those, the 3 and 4, but at least for this one.
It seems to me, though, that, I mean, I fully agree that we have text standards for a reason, you know, and that's to follow them. Otherwise, why would we have text standards at all? But I think on the flip side of that, there's also a process for achieving a waiver and a variance. And, you know, and the ones that were listed by the applicant, you know, there were topographical constraints, there were the streams, natural features, and if I look at number 3, you know, I think there's a reason why, you know, that driveway has to be more than 500 feet, or the cul-de-sac street has to be more than 500 feet. It's because of those constraints, in addition to what Cindy mentioned was the, you know, meeting up with the excess going to the north. So I think that, I think they're making a valid argument for a waiver based on what is allowed for under the text standards.
Let me ask it a different way. If that road came in from Independence and continued and did like a loop around the site, and it was a road, I think both of those variances would go away, and they are able to do that. In space and time and reality on this site, there's no wetlands prohibiting this from happening, right? That's where I'm at. I'm with you in that it kind of seems like an okay thing, but that's not our role here for standards of approval. That is not what we benchmark the variance process on. This is a quasi-judicial ruling that sets potentially precedent, and you know, it has other reverberations throughout the land development process beyond just this, right? And so if I go back to, there's nothing in my mind that I can see that's stopping them from doing this other than the site design. They can put a road in, they just didn't. They could connect it back, they just didn't, right? Because of, you know, it looks like a pretty standard parking arrangement flanking around the perimeter of a building. That was a decision they made, right? We are under no obligation to facilitate that decision. We have these standards for approval, and you know, feel free to roll with how your interpretation goes. I am just not seeing anything prohibiting these from being met on these 5 or 6 standards for approval.
Well, I hear you. No, I don't disagree with that. I mean, there isn't anything prohibiting them from meeting that. I kind of look at it like, I think the code requires, you know, I guess just reading our standards for approval, that an unnecessary hardship would result in the strict application of this chapter. I'm sort of honing in on the unnecessary hardship part. It's like it's not necessary to dedicate that as a public street. I mean, they have the functional connectivity either way. You know, I think with having buildings on either side of this potential street, you know, the one that projects north, having that be a street, you're sort of bisecting their site. You're having people who may park on one side and have to cross over the street. I don't know, it just, to me, it seems like it works better the way that they've proposed it. You have the functional connectivity, you have the ability for emergency access. You know, you've got all the benefits of the connectivity without having another street that the city has to maintain. It's internal to the site, they own it, they maintain it. I don't know, I just don't feel like it's necessary to grant that, to extend that as a street.
Okay. I mean, we don't have to agree.
Dennis, any thoughts?
Just a point of clarification, Cindy, I think you mentioned you're still working through whether or not the proposed 50-foot right-of-way would be public or private. Is that, are y'all leaning one way or another?
We just felt that the city probably would not want something with that crossing, but I don't know that, I think that they'd be happy to leave it private if that's the concern, is the cost to the public,
Gotcha.
since it is specifically for this development.
Okay.
I guess one question, Rob, for you. What would be the hardship of them complying with the text standards? That would be different from any other developer saying, I don't want to put a road in, or I need parking, or whatever, right? Like, what is the literal hardship that is created from following our text standards here?
I guess I can defer to Cindy to answer that question. I mean, I have my thoughts, but.
Well, what I'm interested, we can do both, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts too, because.
Oh. Well, I don't know that there is a true hardship. The only one I can think of, just at a glance, would be parking. You know, if they have a certain number of spaces to be able to serve the units, we obviously would not meet our tech standards to propose the perpendicular parking as they have shown. So they would have to eliminate however many spaces that is. And I mean, perhaps they could do on-street parking or something like that to sort of pick back up a few of those spaces, but they wouldn't be able to as efficiently park the site. Plus, you're also, like I said, I don't know that this is a hardship, but it's more of a site constraint that you've got residences on both sides of this street. You see that all the time internal to, apartment complexes and townhomes and things like that. But having, a street that bisects that, I don't know that that's a big deal. I just, like I said, I keep honing in on the unnecessary part. I don't feel like it's necessary to dedicate that as a street. That's my opinion.
And I would just add the other hardship is what Mr. Frank talked about. I mean, the implications of the legal impacts to other properties that we're responsible to.
If you, let's say we weren't concerned about the connection that goes north, if we just said, okay, you're coming in from Independence, we want a street that connects and it would get rid of both of those variances, how is that a hardship?
The width of the site itself, or the width of the usable part of the site itself, really doesn't lend itself to a looped road that could only be fronted on one side.
You seem to have a looped road that has parking along it.
Right, but a looped street has a whole different character as far as the allowability of parking, the efficiency of it, the driveways and their distance apart from each other. I mean, a variety of things. This was obviously a very difficult site to work with in the first place, but trying to put a loop road around it would basically create an island in the middle. So the inefficiency of that when we're providing an extra access point. Most of the streets, as far as I know, I don't know that that road has a name, but certainly a street sign can be put on it that says it's private from the north. And the main access, the signage, everything for this particular community will be at that intersection of Independence. But I think the other part of the hardship is just the legal ramifications of trying to dedicate that as a right-of-way and building a street when those industrial uses have large trucks and city street standards. I mean, I guess industrial, they can be 36-foot driveways, but right now it's a whole different character. In addition to that, part of it's in the county.
Most of it's
We don't have the ability to change those types of things when they're county properties.
You've both convinced me to rely less on the northern connection back up to River Road to satisfy the technical standards. So that's why I'm trying to find another path forward that doesn't require any variances for you. Because you can do it. It just hasn't been done. Can you or can you not design a site that complies with these tech standards? I say yes, you can. It just hasn't been done.
But we feel that that's an unnecessary hardship to loop a road in a very narrow parcel of land for efficient use of the property. Whereas you don't have to prove that the absence of the adjustment means that no reasonable use can be made.
So tell me again, what's the hardship?
It says we don't have to show that the hardship is the absence of the use itself. We just agree to
Okay,
disagree.
yeah, no
I
worries.
mean, design-wise, it would severely impede the proposed development potential for this property. It was rezoned for a higher density of development. We're trying to take advantage of that, certainly, but the hardships have to do, or the hardship, the justification is the site constraints itself. It's basically one-sided on Independence, or on River Road.
So, just a question for Mr. Frank. You mentioned that the property owners on that northern access easement are against these residents using that roadway?
It's awkward for me when I speak for someone
Well,
else, so let me try to
understood.
characterize the comments that we heard as best I can. The concern that was raised was an overuse of that section of this land might inhibit their use of their easement for their heavy trucks to go back and forth across it. And that's what was communicated in the public hearings in connection with the zoning.
Okay.
May I add one other thought?
Sure.
Not that you asked me, and you're outside the public hearing, so I want to ask permission. The land has been rezoned on a conditional basis. So a very specific use pursuant to a specific site plan has been approved by the city. That use cannot be implemented with a loop road that goes through the development and back out. And so to the extent that you need to identify a specific hardship, perhaps that's just it, that we cannot develop this property consistent with the current applicable zoning without that variance for the length of the cul-de-sac road.
What will you be unable to achieve by doing that?
Again, it's a very specific site plan that's included with the rezoning that depicts that layout, and so.
I'm sorry, I might not have been clear with that question. If, let's say, a road came through, let's say you didn't need to come in for both of those variances for 3 and 4, what would you then be unable to do with that site?
We would be unable to develop it in accordance with the current zoning, which contemplates that number of units.
With the
that number-
current zoning or the current plan?
Those are both the same thing.
No, they're not. You could redesign this and be compliant with the zoning.
Respectfully, they are the same thing. The zoning is conditional. One of the conditions of the zoning is that we develop in accordance with the site plan that was approved in connection with the rezone. So they are indeed one and the same thing. And
I see, okay.
that conditional site plan specifically contemplates a street in the location that we're asking you to put a street in. We've changed it to be a street rather than a drive, but the orientation and use of the land is consistent with the site plan that's been approved.
Okay, I don't think anyone's saying to change the use. It would be the site plan that would change. And I think I'm good now.
Okay.
Thank you. And I have a question for staff, is that all right? Brian, if bringing in a public street in a way, wherever it did, however it went to where there wouldn't be any variances required, would that prohibit the use allowed by zoning of this property?
It would require a modification to the approved plan, which would have to go back through the entitlement process, so yes.
So they could in fact do it?
They could not build the current plan as approved by city council through the rezoning process if they did that. They would have to go back through the process with a new plan to get that entitlement approved.
Thank you.
What are the, I guess, wishes of the committee?
We're just down to number 3, right?
We are, well, we've got 2 items of business left. We have the third variance, yes, and the approval of the overall plan.
So I think maybe Chad, if the cul-de-sac were 500 feet exactly, that would eliminate variance number 3, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I guess that's what the variance is, and so
Wait.
if they complied with it. then-
Understood it that way.
So the waiver 3, length of a cul-de-sac street.
Oh, so what you're saying is if we simply pulled the cul-de-sac bulb back,
So currently it's 668 feet. If it were 500 feet in length,
No, I wouldn't do that. Their location of it is very sensible. I mean, at the kind of nexus of 3 two driveways and a road coming in, I think makes a lot of sense at that location.
And that was kind of my point, that the cul-de-sac is there, located for that reason. It's a logical location for it at the nexus of those three streets. It just happens to become more than 500 feet at that point. And that has to do with some of the site constraints.
That sounds like a motion, Carl.
That is my motion.
Do you have, okay. Can you repeat that one more
Sure.
time, just so?
I make a motion to approve waiver number 3 on the basis of the site constraints due to the shape of the property and the proximity of the wetlands and the alignment of the alternative access drive.
Can I ask a question before we vote on that? What are the site constraints prohibiting them from complying with the text standards? I'm still not seeing it.
I'm referring, to me, the site constraints are the ones that are up front of the parcel adjacent to River Road, which you got to get past those first before you can get to the developable part of the property.
That is correct. From that point forward, though, there are other paths that don't require variances. I guess that's where I'm at. And none of these standards for approval, I think, are any of the rationale, any of the logical reasons that I've heard. They just simply don't hit these things. It is possible to do, they're not being done. In my mind, our role here is not to facilitate ease of development. That's not what this quasi-judicial group is for, right? This is a very delineated process. And what our standards are very delineated for approval. So, anyway, I think I feel like we've kind of hashed this
I've
out
made my
enough. Shall we
motion.
go? Yeah.
We've got a motion on the table. I'll second the motion. I just don't feel like any change of I guess the design would create a meaningful improvement to the site plan.
Which, I'm sorry, I just have to find out, based on not creating a meaningful approval, what standard for approval does that comply with? I'm lost.
Mr. Chair, you can close discussion at any point you deem reasonable.
All right, I'll shut up. Just go for it.
So we've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, so that's the 5 waivers. The last item of discussion on this particular project is the approval of the overall plan. I guess the only clarification that, other than the bridge culvert, bottomless culvert clarification I made previously, I don't know, does this plan specify a public or a private street?
Does not.
No, but we're certainly willing to take a
Either way.
condition of approval that it be privately maintained, and obviously it'll be privately paid for.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on a public or a private street. I'm not going to make that motion. I was just making sure that it wasn't specified somewhere and we missed it.
Yeah, this just became an extra step because of the street. It's
Yeah.
become a major subdivision because we're dedicating a street, and so therefore, with the waivers,
Well,
you have to,
Yeah, I think in my perspective, the 2 big things that this improvement that this makes is the improvement of emergency access for the culvert bridge. That was a big change for me, and the pedestrian connectivity of the sidewalk out to the River Road area. Those were 2 big things that weren't provided on the previous. I mean, the circulation's basically the same, right? I mean,
That's
but
correct.
it's those 2 things, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is where would the emergency vehicles be coming from? Would it be that main entrance? Yeah, so that provides a definite improvement for emergency access. So, I mean, I think ultimately that's where I lie. Okay, but you answered my question, thank you. I will make the motion to approve the plan as presented. I don't know that did I have to have justification for that? I mean,
With the conditions outlined in the staff
oh,
report?
yes, thank you. Yes, with the conditions outlined in the staff report.
I'll second.
Second by Dennis. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. That passes. So I guess that closes that particular item. The next item on the agenda is the Helmsdale Phase 2. It's my understanding that a continuance is being requested. Is that correct?
That is correct. Their continuance being requested to your next month's meeting, which will be on December 14th.
December 14th. Okay. We have to make a motion, take action on that continuance? All right. I'm going to make a motion that we continue the item to the next meeting at the request of the applicant.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. That brings us to our third item, which is 5067 and 5069 Peachtree Avenue. The staff have a presentation.
Yes, the subject project includes approximately 0.4 acres. It's 2 vacant tracts located at the end of Peachtree Avenue. Peachtree Avenue east of Donna is a platted city-maintained gravel street within a 50-foot right-of-way. The applicant proposes to extend the existing gravel road to provide access to these 2 final lots at the end of the street. The standard street cross-section would be, pavement, curb and gutter, plaza, sidewalks. So the requested adjustment is relief from that standard. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The applicant is prepared to make a presentation as well.
Any questions for Brian? Brian, I just wanted to confirm, I think you and I talked about it on the way in here, did this go to any kind of pre-TRC or a technical review committee yet to
No,
deal with any of this? Okay.
It has not.
It has not. Okay. And I know that there was some stuff in the staff report about grinder pump stations and gravity mains and stuff like that. That's not part of what we're reviewing
No,
today. That, as I understand it, is a minor encroachment that would be dealt with outside of this committee. It's
Right.
usually, I think, okay.
The only question I had, Brian, is does staff know, is Peachtree going to be improved at any given time?
I'm not aware of any plans for the improvement of Peachtree. It's a gravel road from, just west of Donna all the way down to the end.
Okay.
I don't know if it's relevant here, but, when reading over these packets to prepare for these meetings, I did give Jay Carter, our streets manager, a call to find out if there was any plans for improvement, and he did not indicate that there was any current plans for improvement of Peachtree. Any other questions for Brian? Thanks.
Thank you.
Does applicant wish to speak?
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Dutton. My wife and I are kind of mom and pop builders in town and in the area. And I want to thank Brian. He stole all my thunder. Like, that was the bulk of my presentation, really. One thing I would like to add, and he's got a PowerPoint presentation that I brought, and the final slide on that PowerPoint presentation was a boots-on-the-ground drive that I took down Peachtree Avenue yesterday afternoon. It was pouring rain, but this will just give you a 1-minute drive down the road to give you an idea exactly what the conditions are on the ground. And as Brian had mentioned, from Donna Ave all the way to the dead end of Peachtree, which is where these lots exist, is gravel. It's also in very good condition. I mean, it was pouring rain all day yesterday, and as you guys and gals may know, You know, typically a gravel road will get nasty in the rain, but it's actually already in very good condition. I also noticed that at the subject lots, which are at the dead end, it looks like the gravel's actually there already. It's just overgrown with weeds. But really, from my perspective, this should be fairly simple. So all we're looking to do is build a couple cottages at the end of the house and extend the gravel so as to accommodate those. If you could hit play on that video, this might help.
Are you coming up on Donna here?
Yes, that was, in fact, yeah, I didn't realize there'd be no sound, but that's all right. So we're coming up on Donna. So the gravel started even before
Yeah.
Donna. So the survey pictures that you saw, that Brian, that he had presented, the gravel actually goes well to the left of the slides. Now, I did a rough count as I was driving down the road. Turns out there are 10 houses situated already on the gravel part of this road. And these two lots, you know, as is often the case in these little pockets around town, they're just the last lots that never got developed. So, and again, I pull up on the very end, and by the way, I was glad I saw your sign, because I didn't know what time this meeting was. I'm a little new to this, forgive me for that, but it looks like the gravel actually continues, and it's just overgrown. But, you know, my request here is just to keep the road, oh, there's my dog, yeah, she's with me, is just to extend the road so as to accommodate these last two lots in the same condition as the road was for the prior 10 houses.
Have any trees been removed recently? It looked like on all the aerial photographs that that was a fairly wooded area. Have those trees been removed recently?
To my knowledge, I really have no idea if or when trees had been removed. I do know that it had been bush hogged a while back, so I don't know what, if any, trees were there prior to the bush hogging. And I had nothing to do with any of that. I'm late to the party here, but I know it got bush hogged within this calendar year. I know nothing about trees.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
I think you're just proposing to build a gravel roadway to city standards, the city gravel road standards?
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, and again, it might even be under all those weeds, but the surface on which I was driving to get to these last two lots, I'm just looking to make sure it's extended in the exact same, you know, condition or
Alignment,
whatever standards are required for essentially a gravel road, and it's just those last two lots. That is the dead end of the road. Pine Street cuts across at the end of where that picture frame stops right there. So you're looking basically into the backyards of the houses along Pine Street. So these literally are the last two lots on Peachtree.
There's
So-
no right-of-way that extends beyond where those trees are, right? That's where the right-of-way ends.
Correct. No,
Okay.
it's private property at that tree line that you're seeing in the picture. So those are the private property owners on Pine Street. That's their backyards, basically. This is the true dead end of Peachtree.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess, anybody have any thoughts on this?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Public hearing.
Yeah, no, I was just going to have to see if we had any discussion before I open the public hearing, although, but we'll go ahead and do that. I'd like to go ahead and open the public hearing for this matter. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this? Have you been sworn in yet? I'm sorry. He has, okay, excuse me.
Craig Luzak, I'm on the property next, that's behind that.
I'm sorry,
That lot
can you,
has been stripped.
can you state your name again? Can you state your name?
Craig Luzak, 5054 Park Avenue. That lot has been stripped, about 100 trees have been taken out of it. No objection to the road extending on. Is this for rezoning the property? It was hard to understand the letter.
Sir, the Design Adjustment Committee can't answer your questions. I'm sure they'll take note of them, and they'll probably ask the applicant if he can reply, but it's not a question and answer. So, but you're welcome to make whatever statements you want about the proposal, but I just want you to know they can't answer your questions.
Okay. Then I'm fine.
Brian, are you gonna, okay, you'll get with each other after the hearing, is that, okay. If there's nobody else from the public who would like to speak, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Personally, I don't have a problem with, extending the road at 16 feet wide. The concern, if I have any, is with drainage. And again, in just doing research for this meeting, it looks like the road does drain in the direction that the car was moving, the truck was moving down the road, and the right-of-way does end into backyards of adjacent neighboring residences. And with gravel roads, one of the things the problems that we see, I mean, we have some gravel roads in the city, but there's a reason why the standard is paved. And that is, you get a lot of migration of stone dust, a lot of migration of fines from gravel roads. And fair or not, I think that unimproved, maybe previously wooded, but currently sort of unimproved area probably was the repository of some of that drainage. It was helping to sort of passively infiltrate that runoff. And if you go and remove all of that underbrush and you gravel it, which again is certainly reasonable, now you're pushing that drainage potentially onto the adjoining lots, which I guess are to the east. So that's really my biggest concern. I mean, I think it's hard for me to justify asking someone to pave and put in sidewalks at the end of a road that's currently gravel. And I say that, if it were part of the city's plans to come in here and pave it next year, then, again, fair or not, I would probably be more in favor of denying the request, because you would be burdening the city's taxpayers with something that is a code requirement for the applicant to make. But there's not any plans. I mean, I don't know of any initiative to pave gravel streets. I mean, this is a request that we get all the time. And, and for that reason, based on the existing street, I'm personally fine with allowing gravel, but we got to have a way to manage that drainage. I believe that any improvement within the public right-of-way would require a city right-of-way permit. And as part of that right-of-way permit, if we do move forward with this, I'm going to probably request that drainage be dealt with in some way. I don't know exactly how we do that. I mean, I don't think that's really our role, is to design it for them. I think if they want to extend the gravel, they're going to have to find a way to manage that drainage. Perhaps small little swale that terminates at the end that can serve as a passive infiltration area. Perhaps that's warranted, but I'm hoping that you can work with the engineering staff to come up with something that's a decent solution there. Any other thoughts?
Seems reasonable.
And it seems that the standard for approval of conflict with an approved or built roadway construction project adjacent to or in the vicinity of the site seems to be, in my mind, the logical path forward for approval of this variance.
Where are you looking there, Chad? Sorry.
It's our standards for approval.
Oh, okay, yeah, there. Okay, gotcha.
I think, at least on my sheet's the last one.
Yeah.
It's a built roadway right now, and I think continuing that as built seems very logical, with the condition maybe that they satisfy any stormwater requirements, as you've already discussed.
Okay. So Brian, we're just dealing with a variance, no no plan approval on this one, just the variance. Okay. Since we've already had the public hearing, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that we,
Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
just under our rules, I'm just going to ask the applicant, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or are you good with what's been said? Okay, thanks.
okay. Thanks. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the variance request. I think he's requesting 16 feet of wide of gravel. I think is that okay for fire? Okay. I will make the motion to approve the request with the added condition that they address drainage through the right-of-way permit process. Yeah, that's it.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Any other business? We'll close the meeting. Thank you.